The Toronto skyline disappeared below the clouds as my plane lifted off, and I couldn't help but smile. 6 months of grueling work establishing our company's new Canadian branch had finally come to an end. My fingers drummed against the armrest as I thought about walking through my front door in New York, collapsing onto my Italian leather couch, and maybe taking my Porsche 911 for a spin through the Hudson Valley. God, I'd missed that car. I pulled out my phone to text my family that I was on my way home. Radio silence for the past 2 weeks had been strange, but I figured everyone was just busy with their own lives. Mom and Dad were probably caught up in their retirement hobbies, and Harper, well, my younger sister was always chasing some new business venture. At 32, I'd learned not to worry too much about temporary communication gaps. We all had our own lives to manage. The flight attendant offered me champagne, and I accepted. Why not celebrate? The Canadian expansion had exceeded all projections. My boss had even hinted at a significant bonus coming my way. Maybe I'd use it to finally renovate the kitchen in my Tribeca townhouse. Mom had been nagging me about those outdated countertops for years. Landing at JFK felt like a homecoming. The familiar chaos of New York hit me the moment I stepped off the plane. The accents, the urgency, the energy that no other city could match. I grabbed my luggage and headed for the taxi line, deciding to leave my car at the office and head straight home. 6 months of living out of hotels had left me craving my own space. The taxi wound through Manhattan traffic, and I watched the city blur past the window. Everything looked exactly the same, yet somehow different after half a year away. When we finally pulled up to my street in Tribeca, I felt my shoulders relax for the first time in months. Home, finally home. I paid the driver and hauled my suitcases up the familiar steps. My key slid into the lock, but it wouldn't turn. Frowning, I tried again. Nothing. Had the lock gotten rusty while I was gone? I jiggled it harder, but the mechanism wouldn't budge. Then I heard footsteps approaching from inside. The door swung open, and a woman I'd never seen before stood there in yoga pants and a Princeton sweatshirt. "Can I help you?" she asked, looking at me like I was some kind of door-to-door salesman. I blinked. "I'm sorry, who are you? This is my house." She crossed her arms. "I think you're confused. We bought this house 4 months ago." The words hit me like ice water. "That's impossible. I own this house. I've owned it for 5 years. And this..." Her expression shifted from annoyed to concerned. "Look, I don't know what to tell you, but we purchased this property through a legitimate real estate transaction. The previous owners were an older couple, the Mitchells, I think." Mitchell. That was my last name. My parents were Robert and Linda Mitchell. My hands started shaking as I pulled out my phone, scrolling to my parents' number. The woman in my doorway, my former doorway, watched me with a mixture of pity and wariness. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before Dad picked up. "Ryan, how's Toronto treating you?" His voice sounded normal, casual, like nothing in the world was wrong. "Dad, I'm standing outside my house in New York, and there's a stranger living here claiming she bought it. What the hell is going on?" There was a pause, a long pause, then Dad cleared his throat. "Why don't you come by the house? We need to talk." "Talk? Dad, someone is living in my house." "Just come home, son. We'll explain everything." The line went dead. I stood there on what used to be my front steps, staring at my phone in disbelief. The woman had quietly closed the door, probably calling the police in case I turned out to be dangerous. I couldn't blame her. I probably looked unhinged standing there with my suitcases, claiming ownership of her home. I called an Uber to my parents' house in Queens, my mind racing through every possible explanation. Identity theft? Some kind of mistake at the county records office? A scam? But Dad had known. The way he'd paused, the way he'd said we need to talk, he knew exactly what had happened. The 40-minute ride felt like hours. I tried calling Harper, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Mom didn't pick up either. By the time we pulled up to my childhood home, my stomach was in knots. Mom opened the door before I could knock. She looked older than when I'd left. New lines around her eyes, her hair more gray than brown now. "Ryan, honey, come in." The house smelled like coffee and cinnamon, Mom's stress baking scent. Dad sat in his recliner in the living room, and Harper was perched on the couch, examining her manicure. She looked up when I walked in, offering a weak smile. "Okay," I said, setting down my bags. "Someone needs to tell me what's going on, right now." Dad shifted in his chair. "Sit down, son." "I don't want to sit down. I want to know why someone else is living in my house." Harper finally spoke up. "It was supposed to be temporary, Ryan. Just a loan." "A loan? What loan?" Mom wrung her hands. "Harper had this investment opportunity, a startup company. She needed capital quickly or she'd lose her spot." The pieces started clicking together in my mind, but I didn't want to believe it. "You sold my house?" "We didn't sell it," Dad said quickly. "We borrowed against it. The plan was to pay everything back before you returned." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Borrowed against it? You don't borrow against something you don't own. That house was in my name. Only my name." Harper stood up, defensive now. "You were gone for 6 months. You weren't using it. And this investment was supposed to triple our money. We were going to buy your house back and have plenty left over." "My Porsche," I said suddenly, remembering. "Where's my car?" The silence told me everything. "You sold my car too?" My voice came out as barely a whisper. Mom reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Honey, it was all supposed to work out. Harper's business partner said the returns would come in within 90 days. We thought we'd have everything back to normal before you came home." I sank onto the couch, my legs suddenly unable to hold me. How? How did you even do this? Everything was in my name. Dad wouldn't meet my eyes. We had some documents, power of attorney from when you had that surgery 3 years ago. We just modified them a little. Modified them. I repeated the words slowly, tasting their implications. "You mean you forged legal documents?" "Don't be dramatic," Harper snapped. "It's not forgery when it's family. We were just borrowing. If the investment hadn't gone bad..." The investment went bad? I stood up again, pacing now. So not only did you steal my house and my car, but you lost the money too? The market shifted, Harper said defensively. Crypto is volatile. Everyone knows that. Crypto? You gambled my entire life on cryptocurrency? Mom started crying. We didn't mean for this to happen. We thought we were helping Harper build something. She's your sister, Ryan. Family helps family. Family helps family? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Family doesn't steal from family. You sold my house. My home. The place I worked 60-hour weeks for 5 years to afford. You're being selfish, Harper said, crossing her arms. You have a good job. You can buy another house. This was my one shot at making something of myself. I stared at my sister. She was 28 years old and had never held a steady job for more than 6 months. Every year, there was a new scheme, a new guaranteed path to success. And every time, my parents enabled her, usually with their own money. But this time, they'd used mine. How much? I asked. How much did you get for my house? Dad finally looked at me. $600,000. My house was worth at least $750 in the current market. They'd sold it quick and cheap. And the Porsche? $150, Harper said, like she was proud of the number. My 2021 Porsche 911 Turbo, which I'd bought new for over $200,000, sold for $150. The rage building inside me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. These people, my own family, had dismantled my entire life while I was away working to build my career. I want to see the documents, I said coldly. Every single paper you signed with my name on it. Mom's tears intensified. Ryan, please, we're still family. We can work this out together. Work this out? How? Can you give me my house back? Can you return my car? Can you undo the fact that you committed fraud and identity theft? You're not going to involve the police, Dad said, but it sounded more like a question than a statement. I pulled out my phone. Watch me. Harper lunged for my phone, but I stepped back. You can't call the cops on your own family. What kind of son does that? What kind of family steals everything a person owns? I shot back. We didn't steal, Mom sobbed. We borrowed. There's a difference. No, Mom. Borrowing involves asking permission. What you did is called fraud, forgery, and theft. Those are felonies. Dad stood up, his face red. Now you listen here. We raised you. We put you through college. We supported you your entire life. And this is how you repay us? By threatening us with prison? You put me through college? I laughed bitterly. I had scholarships and student loans that I'm still paying off. You guys gave me $5,000 freshman year and acted like you'd funded my entire education. That's because we didn't have more, Mom cried. We gave you what we could. And I never asked for more. I never asked you to bankrupt yourselves for me. I worked my ass off to build my life, and you destroyed it in 6 months. Harper pulled out her phone, scrolling through something. Look, I can show you the investment portfolio. It's not all gone. There's still about $40,000 in the account. It could recover. $40,000 out of $750,000. The market will bounce back, she insisted. Crypto always does. In a year or two. I don't have a year or two. I don't have a place to live. My credit is probably destroyed. Do you have any idea what you've done to my life? Stop being such a victim, Harper spat. You make what, $300,000 a year? You'll be fine. Some of us don't have your privileges. Privileges? I worked for everything I have. You're a man in corporate America. You were born on third base. I couldn't believe she was playing this card. Harper, who'd had the same opportunities I'd had, the same education offered, but had chosen to drop out of college twice to pursue get-rich-quick schemes. Give me the documents, I said again, my voice deadly calm now. Dad walked to his desk and pulled out a folder. His hands shook as he handed it to me. I opened it and saw my signature, or rather, a forgery of my signature on document after document. Sale agreements, transfer deeds, power of attorney forms that had been clearly altered. This is pathetic, I said, examining the forgeries. These don't even look like my signature. The real estate lawyer didn't seem to mind, Harper said defensively. What lawyer? What was their name? She mumbled something about a friend of a friend who'd helped them for cheap. Of course. They'd used some shady, probably unlicensed lawyer to push through fraudulent documents. I took photos of every page with my phone. I'm going to ask you one more time. Is there any way you can undo this? Any way to get my property back? They all looked at each other, and I had my answer. Then we're done here. I picked up my suitcases. Where are you going? Mom asked desperately. To a hotel, and then to a real lawyer, and Ryan, please, Dad said, his anger deflating into desperation. We're family. We can work this out without involving outsiders. You involved outsiders when you sold my house to strangers, I said, heading for the door. The next morning, I sat in the office of Patricia Lawson, one of New York's top fraud attorneys. She examined the documents I'd photographed, her expression growing more severe with each page. This is clear forgery and fraud, she said finally. The altered power of attorney alone is a federal crime. Did they use the Postal Service or any electronic communications in executing these sales? Probably. Why? That makes it mail fraud or wire fraud, federal charges. Your family is looking at serious prison time if we pursue this. The weight of her words settled on my shoulders. Prison time. For my parents. For Harper. What are my options? I asked. You can file a civil suit to recover damages. Given the evidence, you'd almost certainly win. But the criminal charges, that's up to the district attorney once we report this. And we do have to report it for the civil case to proceed. What if they can't pay the damages? Patricia pulled up something on her computer. I've done a preliminary asset search. Your parents' house is worth about $400,000. They have maybe $50,000 in retirement savings. Your sister appears to have no significant assets. You might recover some money, but not the full amount. And if criminal charges are filed, forgery, fraud, identity theft, your parents could face 5 to 10 years. Your sister, as the primary beneficiary, could face similar charges. I left Patricia's office with a retainer agreement and a sick feeling in my stomach. That night, in my hotel room, I called my cousin Jake in California. He was the only extended family I trusted. They did what? Jake's shock was evident even over the phone. I explained everything. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Ryan, I hate to tell you this, but this isn't the first time. What do you mean? Remember when Grandma died 5 years ago? She left everyone a little something. You were in London for that work project. Yeah, I got my check, 20,000. Jake sighed. That's the thing. You didn't get 20,000. You got 50,000. I saw the will myself. The room spun. They took 30,000? I thought you knew and just didn't want to make a fuss. It was right when Harper was starting that fashion blog thing. Another betrayal. Another theft. How many times had they stolen from me without my knowledge? The next day, I went back to Patricia with this new information. She added it to the file. This establishes a pattern of behavior. It'll strengthen your case significantly. That afternoon, my phone exploded with messages. Apparently, my parents had been served with the lawsuit papers. Hey, Mom called 15 times. Dad sent text after text. Harper left a voicemail calling me every name in the book. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I focused on rebuilding. My boss was understanding about my situation and offered me an advance on my bonus. I found a small apartment in Brooklyn, a far cry from my Tribeca townhouse, but it was something. I started the long process of rebuilding my credit, dealing with banks, explaining to everyone why the ownership of my assets had suddenly changed. 2 weeks into this new reality, I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Is this Ryan Mitchell? The voice was professional, businesslike. Yes. This is Detective Morrison with the NYPD Financial Crimes Unit. We've received some interesting information about your case from the DA's office. Can you come in to discuss it? The NYPD Financial Crimes Unit operated out of a nondescript building in Lower Manhattan. Detective Morrison was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. She'd spread out all my documents across a conference table and had added her own findings. Mr. Mitchell, in investigating your case, we've uncovered something larger, she began. The lawyer your family used, Marcus Chen, isn't a lawyer at all. He's been running similar schemes across the city, helping family members defraud each other for a cut of the profits. A cut? I leaned forward. He got paid from the sale of my house? 50,000, according to the banking records. But here's where it gets interesting. Your sister has been in contact with Chen for over 2 years. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. She showed me email printouts between Harper and Chen, dating back to when I'd first mentioned the Canada assignment. They'd been planning this from the beginning. Harper had researched how much my properties were worth, how to forge the documents, how to find quick buyers who wouldn't ask too many questions. Your parents claimed they thought it was a legitimate loan process, Morrison continued, but these emails suggest your sister knowingly deceived them about the legality while also fully involving them in the execution. I stared at the emails, seeing Harper's words in black and white. My brother's an idiot. He won't even check his accounts while he's gone. We'll have everything sold and the money reinvested before he knows what happened. This changes things, Morrison said. This is conspiracy to commit fraud. It's organized crime, in a sense. Your sister could be looking at 15 to 20 years. That night, I couldn't sleep. The betrayal was complete, calculated, and cruel. Harper hadn't just stolen from me on impulse. She'd planned it meticulously. And my parents, whether they were deceived about the legality or not, had been willing participants. The next morning, I got a call from Patricia. The DA wants to meet with you. They're considering pressing criminal charges, but they want to gauge your cooperation level. I met with Assistant District Attorney James Crawford that afternoon. He was all business, laying out the potential charges and asking about my willingness to testify. I'll be honest, Mr. Mitchell, cases like this, where it's family, often fall apart because victims refuse to cooperate. I need to know you're committed to seeing this through. They stole everything from me, I said simply. I'm committed. A week later, the arrests happened. I wasn't there, but I heard about it from Jake. The police showed up at my parents' house during dinner. They were both taken away in handcuffs. Harper was arrested at the yoga studio where she'd been spending my money on private lessons. The news hit the family like a bomb. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone had an opinion. Half thought I was a monster for prosecuting my own family. The other half shared their own stories of Harper's schemes and my parents' enabling over the years. My Aunt Susan called me one evening. You know, Harper borrowed $5,000 from me 3 years ago, never paid it back. Your parents said I should forgive it because family helps family. I'm glad someone's finally holding them accountable. But not everyone felt that way. My Uncle Tony, Dad's brother, left me a voicemail. You're dead to this family. Dead. How dare you put your parents through this? The preliminary hearing was set for 3 weeks after the arrests. My parents and Harper were out on bail, of course, but they'd been ordered not to contact me. That didn't stop them from trying to reach out through intermediaries. The day of the preliminary hearing arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood perfectly. I sat in the courthouse waiting room, my lawyer Patricia beside me, watching other families navigate their own legal dramas. Strange to think that just 2 months ago, I'd been celebrating the successful launch of our Toronto branch. The Mitchell case, a bailiff called out. We entered the courtroom. My parents and Harper sat at the defense table with their lawyers, 3 different attorneys, since their interests had diverged. Harper's lawyer was clearly the most expensive, probably paid for with what was left of my money. I took the witness stand first. The ADA, Crawford, walked me through the timeline, my departure to Canada, the discovery of the house sale, the confrontation with my family. I presented the original documents and the forgeries side by side. The differences were obvious to anyone who looked. Mr. Mitchell, Crawford asked, did you ever give your family permission to sell your property? No. Did you ever discuss lending them money from these sales? No. Had you ever given them power of attorney over your financial affairs? only once, for a medical procedure 3 years ago, and it was specifically limited to medical decisions only. It expired after 30 days. Harper's lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Brennan, cross-examined me aggressively. Isn't it true that you've lent your sister money in the past? Small amounts, yes, maybe 500 here or there. And did she pay you back? No. But you kept lending to her? I stopped 2 years ago when I realized she'd never pay me back. So you have a history of financial support for your sister? Supporting someone with small loans is very different from them stealing my house. Objection, Brennan said, assumes facts, not in evidence. Sustained, the judge said, but the damage was done. My mother took the stand next, and it was painful to watch. She sobbed through her entire testimony, claiming she thought everything was legal, that Harper had assured them I'd agreed to it all. She said Ryan wanted to help but didn't want to make a big deal about it. Mom wept. She said he was too proud to admit he wanted to support his family. It was a masterful performance, or maybe she really believed it. I couldn't tell anymore. Dad's testimony was different. He was angry, defiant. My son makes more money in a year than I made in 5, he spat. We needed help, and he wasn't there. Family should come first. So you felt entitled to his assets? Crawford pressed. I felt a father shouldn't have to beg his son for help. Did you ask him for help? He would have said no. So you didn't ask? Silence. Harper's testimony was the most damaging to herself. She tried to paint herself as a victim, claiming I'd always been the golden child, that our parents had given me opportunities they denied her. But under cross-examination, her story fell apart. Miss Mitchell, Crawford asked, these emails show you discussing the fraud with Marcus Chen 2 years ago. How do you explain that? That's not what those emails mean, Harper said desperately. This one says, quote, we need to wait until he's out of the country for an extended period. The Canada thing is perfect. How else should we interpret that? Harper's lawyer objected repeatedly, but the damage was mounting. The preliminary hearing concluded with the judge finding sufficient evidence for the case to proceed to trial. All 3 defendants were formally charged my parents with fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Harper with those plus identity theft and money laundering for her dealings with the fake lawyer. The trial date was set for 3 months out. In the meantime, I tried to rebuild my life. Work became my refuge. My boss, Sarah, had been incredibly supportive, even offering me a raise to help with my legal bills. What you're going through is unimaginable, she said during one of our meetings. If you need time off for the trial, take it. Your job will be here. But work was the only thing keeping me sane. The Toronto expansion was thriving, and I threw myself into managing it remotely, anything to avoid thinking about what was coming. One evening, about a month before the trial, I got an unexpected visitor at my Brooklyn apartment. It was Jake, who'd flown in from California. Thought you could use some family support, he said, the non-criminal kind. We spent the weekend together, and he shared more stories about Harper's past schemes that I'd never known about. She'd tried to get their grandmother to change her will. She'd stolen checks from our uncle's business. Each revelation was another knife in my back. Why didn't anyone ever tell me? I asked. Your parents always covered for her, Jake said, and honestly, everyone was a little afraid of becoming her next target. You were successful, lived far enough away. We figured you were safe. The trial began on a Tuesday in September. The courthouse was packed, apparently. Family fraud cases of this magnitude were rare enough to draw attention from court watchers and journalists. I testified for 2 full days. Crawford walked me through every detail, every document, every betrayal. The defense attorneys tried to paint me as vindictive, greedy, uncaring about my family's struggles. You have a substantial income, correct? Harper's lawyer pressed. Yes. Yet you're pursuing your parents and sister for money they don't have? I'm pursuing them for stealing what I earned, even if it means destroying your family. They destroyed our family when they chose to steal from me. The fake lawyer, Marcus Chen, had made a deal with the prosecution and testified against my family. His testimony was damning. I detailed how Harper had approached him, how she'd known exactly what she was doing was illegal, how she'd coached my parents on what to say to make the sale seem legitimate. She said her brother was an arrogant prick who deserved to be taken down a notch, Chen testified. She said he'd never miss the money. I sat in that courtroom, listening to a stranger repeat my sister's words about me, and felt something inside me die. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment or a desperate mistake. This was calculated hatred. My parents' lawyers tried to separate them from Harper, claiming they were manipulated, but the prosecution presented phone records, texts, emails, a clear pattern of involvement. They'd known something was wrong, even if they hadn't known every detail. The most dramatic moment came when Harper took the stand in her own defense. She painted herself as a victim of circumstance, of a sexist society, of a brother who'd abandoned his family for success. Ryan always thought he was better than us, she said, fake tears streaming. He'd come home for holidays, flashing his expensive watch, talking about his trips, his bonuses. He made us feel small. The prosecutor's cross-examination of Harper was brutal. Crawford had done his homework, and he systematically destroyed every one of her claims. Miss Mitchell, you say your brother made you feel small. Yet these text messages to your friend Sophia from 2 years ago say, and I quote, Ryan offered to pay for me to go back to school, but fuck that. I'm not sitting in classes while he plays big shot. I'll get mine another way. Can you explain? Harper stammered. That was taken out of context. What context makes stealing someone's house acceptable? I didn't think of it as stealing. What did you think of it as? Getting what I deserved? That single statement hung in the air like a poison cloud. The jury's faces said everything. The closing arguments were delivered on a Friday. Crawford painted a picture of systematic betrayal, of trust violated at the deepest level. The defendants want you to believe this was about family helping family, he said. But family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't sneak around selling each other's homes. Family doesn't plan for 2 years to rob someone blind while they're serving their company abroad. The defense attorneys each took their turn. My parents' lawyers argued for mercy, for understanding of elderly parents manipulated by a daughter they loved too much. Harper's lawyer went for broke, claiming I was a vindictive son who'd abandoned his family and was now punishing them for surviving without him. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they filed back in, not one of them would look at me. I thought that meant they'd acquitted, that family sympathy had won. On the count of fraud in the first degree, we find the defendant Harper Mitchell guilty. The word guilty echoed through the courtroom. My mother sobbed. Harper stared straight ahead, frozen. On the count of forgery in the first degree, we find the defendant Harper Mitchell guilty. One by one, the charges came down. Harper was convicted on all counts. My parents were found guilty of fraud and conspiracy, but acquitted on the forgery charges. The jury apparently believed they hadn't known about the document alterations. Sentencing was set for 2 weeks later. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I received death threats from extended family members. Someone spray-painted "family traitor" on my apartment building. I had to take time off work and stay in a hotel. The sentencing hearing was quieter than the trial. Harper received 8 to 12 years in federal prison. The judge called her actions a breathtaking betrayal of familial trust and noted her complete lack of remorse. My parents each received 3 to 5 years, with the possibility of early release for good behavior. The judge acknowledged their age and their manipulation by their daughter, but said the severity of the crime demanded prison time. As they were led away in handcuffs, my mother looked back at me one last time. "I forgive you," she mouthed. I wanted to scream. She forgave me, but I said nothing. What was the point? Patricia had warned me that recovering the money would be nearly impossible. My parents' house would be sold to pay restitution, but after legal fees and the division among creditors, I'd be lucky to see $100,000. Harper had nothing left to take. It's been 6 months since the sentencing. I still live in the Brooklyn apartment, though I could afford better now. Sarah promoted me to senior vice president after the Toronto success, and the raise was substantial, but somehow, I can't bring myself to look for another house. The thought of owning property again makes me physically ill. I see a therapist twice a week. Dr. Patel tells me that betrayal trauma is real, that what I'm experiencing is a form of grief. I'm mourning the family I thought I had, the sister I believed loved me, the parents I trusted implicitly. Jake visits every few months. He's the only family I have left, really. The rest have chosen sides, and I'm on the wrong one. He tells me Harper is in a federal facility in Pennsylvania. She's apparently found religion, claims she's reformed. She's written me 14 letters. I've burned them all unopened. My parents are in a minimum security facility upstate. They're eligible for early release in 18 months. Uncle Tony sends me updates I don't ask for, always ending with how I've killed them, how prison is destroying their health. I've stopped reading his emails too. The $40,000 Harper had left in the crypto account, it crashed to nothing 2 weeks after the trial. Even her big investment, the thing she destroyed my life for, turned to dust. Sometimes I wake up at 3 a.m. and think about that day I came home from Toronto. How different everything would be if I'd just called first, if I'd checked my accounts while I was away, if I'd never taken the Canada assignment at all. But Dr. Patel says that's magical thinking. They would have found another way, another time. The betrayal was always there, waiting. I've started dating someone, Maria, a prosecutor I met during the trial. She understands why I triple-check every document now, why I have security cameras everywhere, why trust comes so hard. She doesn't judge me for prosecuting my family. You did what you had to do, she says. They made their choices. Last week, I got a call from Patricia. Marcus Chen, the fake lawyer, had been killed in prison. Apparently, he'd scammed the wrong person's family. I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No sadness. Just nothing. The money, what little I recovered, sits in an account I don't touch. It feels cursed, like 30 pieces of silver. Patricia says I should invest it, make it grow, reclaim my financial future, but every time I look at the balance, all I see is the price of my family. People ask me if I regret it, pressing charges, going through with the trial, sending my family to prison. The truth is complicated. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that they chose theft over asking for help. I regret that Harper hated me enough to destroy everything I'd built, but I don't regret standing up for myself. The Porsche, the townhouse, they were just things, ultimately replaceable. What can't be replaced is the ability to trust, to believe that family means safety, to come home without checking the locks twice and reviewing my bank statements. They took more than money. They took my faith in the fundamental bonds that hold people together. They taught me that love can be a weapon, that family can be the enemy, that the people who should protect you can be the ones who destroy you. But I survived. I'm rebuilding, slowly, carefully. I'll probably never have what I had before, not the money, not the family, not the naive belief that blood means loyalty. But I have something else now, the knowledge that I can survive betrayal, that I can stand up for myself even when it costs everything, that I can rebuild from ashes. That's the real inheritance from all of this, not money or property, but the hard-won understanding that sometimes the only person you can truly trust is yourself. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough to build a new life on, one that no one can steal.